The courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension. The only sound was the steady ticking of the large clock mounted on the wall, marking each agonizing second. All eyes were on James Carter, a well-dressed black man standing confidently before the judge. His tailored navy blue suit contrasted sharply with the dull, oppressive atmosphere of the room. Seated behind him, reporters clutched their pens, spectators leaned forward in their chairs, and the opposing attorney smirked, fully expecting a swift conviction. But what no one knew, not even James himself, was that this case was about to take an unbelievable turn. Judge Evelyn Harper, a woman feared for her cold demeanor and notorious for her harsh sentences, glared down at James from her elevated bench. For years, she had ruled her courtroom like a monarch, her word law, her decisions final. Today would be no different. Or so she thought. Then, she spoke. And what she said sent a shockwave through the room. "You don't belong in that suit." At first, the words hung in the air, almost as if people were unsure they had heard them correctly. The murmurs started softly, then grew into a full-blown uproar. The prosecutor's jaw dropped. The stenographer hesitated before typing. James, however, remained still. He had faced discrimination before. But never like this. Never in a place where justice was supposed to be blind. Before we continue with this shocking courtroom drama, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because what happens next is something you won't believe. James exhaled slowly, keeping his composure. He knew better than to react emotionally, but inside, he could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on him. "Excuse me, Your Honor." His voice was steady. Controlled. Judge Harper leaned forward, her lips curling into a smirk. "You heard me." The entire courtroom was frozen. The defense attorney immediately stood. "Objection, Your Honor." "Overruled," she snapped. A chilling silence fell over the courtroom. The weight of the moment pressed down on James, but he refused to let it show. Instead, he slowly turned his head, scanning the room. The faces in the audience told a story of their own, some were shocked, others averted their eyes, unwilling to acknowledge what had just happened. But not everyone stayed silent. A woman in the second row, an older black woman with graying hair and a sharp gaze, shook her head in disappointment. She muttered just loud enough for those around her to hear, "Same old story. Different day." The defense attorney, still standing, clenched his fists. "Your Honor, I must insist." "I said overruled," Judge Harper repeated, her voice now edged with something more than authority, irritation. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, a smirk playing at her lips. "Now, unless Mr. Carter here has anything useful to say for himself, I'd like to move on to sentencing." James exhaled slowly, his mind racing. He had been prepared for an uphill battle, but this? This was outright mockery of the justice system. He took a step forward. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this case is built on false allegations. I have proof of my innocence, and yet, you refuse to acknowledge it. Why?" Judge Harper chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver through the room. "Why?" she repeated, tilting her head as if genuinely amused. "Because men like you always think the rules don't apply to them." Another wave of gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the bailiff, who had remained stoic all morning, shifted uncomfortably. James felt his stomach tighten, but he refused to give in to anger. Instead, he squared his shoulders, standing even taller than before. "Men like me?" he asked, his voice calm, measured. "Or men who challenge power?" For the first time, something flickered in Judge Harper's eyes, something uncertain. She had expected defiance. But she hadn't expected control. But before she could fire back, the unexpected happened. A chair scraped against the floor as someone stood up in the back of the courtroom. James tilted his head slightly, studying the woman before him. This wasn't just about his case anymore. This was personal. This was about power. And Judge Harper thought she had all of it. People like you, she continued, her voice laced with disdain, think you can manipulate the system, put on a fancy suit, and fool us all. But I see right through it. Gasps echoed through the room. Even the bailiff, a man who had worked in that courtroom for over a decade, seemed uneasy. James remained motionless. But inside? Inside, a fire was burning. Then, something happened. A woman in the back row, dressed in an unassuming black suit, stood up. Special Agent Lisa Monroe. She stepped forward, her ID flashing briefly at her side. Your Honor, may I have a word with you? Privately. Judge Harper's expression shifted from arrogant amusement to annoyance. This is highly inappropriate. I am in the middle of sentencing. Agent Monroe didn't move. I insist. It's urgent. The judge hesitated, clearly irritated. But something in Monroe's tone made her pause. With a frustrated sigh, she stood and motioned for Monroe to follow her into her chambers. The moment the door closed, the murmurs in the courtroom exploded into full-blown conversation. What just happened? Who is that woman? Did the judge really just say that? James turned to his attorney, who looked just as confused as everyone else. Something big is going on, he muttered. Minutes passed. Then, the heavy wooden door swung open. And that's when it happened. Two federal marshals entered first, their faces unreadable. Behind them, Agent Monroe. And behind her, Judge Harper, her hands cuffed behind her back. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters scrambled. The gavel banged against the desk in a desperate attempt to restore order, but the scene unfolding was too shocking to ignore. James turned slowly, taking in the sight of the woman who, just minutes ago, had tried to humiliate him. Now, she was being led away in disgrace. Agent Monroe stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. Judge Evelyn Harper, you are under arrest for bribery, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of judicial misconduct. The weight of her words settled over the room. The judge, this woman who had held so much power, was now just another criminal in handcuffs. James locked eyes with her. She glared back, seething, her once perfectly controlled expression cracking into something raw. Furious. Defeated. But James? James simply adjusted his tie. And walked out of that courtroom with dignity. The fallout was immediate. News channels ran the story non-stop. Investigations revealed that Judge Harper had been accepting bribes for years, unfairly sentencing minorities, and manipulating cases for personal gain. And James? He walked away not just a free man, but a symbol of resilience. Moments like these prove that justice will always prevail, no matter how powerful someone thinks they are. If this story shocked you, subscribe for more real-life cases where truth triumphs over corruption. And let us know in the comments, what would you have done in James's place? Don't forget to like this video so more people can see the truth behind the power of standing strong. Because in the end, the truth always wins.